Hi, everyone. My name is Deb Socia, and I'm the president of the Enterprise Center in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and I'll be moderating the panel today. I encourage you all to read these amazing folks' bios, but for the sake of time, I'm just going to introduce the panelists by their titles. Joining me today are Chattanooga's Mayor, Andy Berke, our Utility Electric Power Board, or EPB's Chief Operating Officer, David Wade, Hamilton County Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Bryan Johnson, and the Benwood Foundation's Program Officer, Lori Quillen. And so I am going to jump right into questions. Mayor Berke, I know you have cared deeply about the issue of the digital divide and the homework gap for some years. Can you talk about the program that has been created in Hamilton County and Chattanooga to help eliminate the issues that have come about because of the pandemic?
Sure. So we have seen a huge surge in interest since the pandemic, but this is a problem that has been going on now for many years, and certainly Chattanooga has been concerned about digital equity. So let me start, if I can, with going backwards, talking a little bit about the problem, and then using that to say what we're doing now. So over the course of many years, we've been seeing families who have struggled with digital access, particularly for their kids. So one of the stories that I always remember is a grandmother telling me about having her grandkids who live with her, taking them from fast food restaurant to fast food restaurant because she didn't want to be seen at the same place 2 nights in a row, and needing to do that so that her grandkids could do homework. Well, that's just too common a story in America today. And Chattanooga is a place with the greatest fiber system in the country, a 600 square mile fiber network that goes to every single home and every single business in our entire area. Doesn't miss any neighborhoods, doesn't miss any houses. It's everywhere. And that's simply unacceptable. So when the pandemic hit, we saw this sharp spike in what people were interested in when it came to internet access. We'd had digital equity as a core principle of the Enterprise Center, which is run of the Innovation District, which is run by the Enterprise Center, headed by you, Deb. And we knew that we needed to help families and kids as more and more of them would be reliant on what was going on in their homes. So coming together, investing through public and private sources, we put together HCS Ed Connect, a program that will reach every family with a child on free or reduced lunch in our entire service area, and provide them with internet at zero cost. So zero cost. We believe that we are the first community in America to do that for every single family with a child on free or reduced lunch. And it's thanks to the amazing work of the people on this panel, like Bryan Johnson, Lori Quillen, David Wade, and of course you, Deb.
David, can you talk about the actual program? How did it come about? Who was involved, and why is EPB engaged?
Well, I think certainly it started a long time ago, as the mayor said, where we thought, how do we solve problems? But there's always been thinking about it before, somewhat incremental. What could we do? Besides what should we do? I guess there's kind of the difference there. And I can remember right when the pandemic started, right a day or two before businesses started shutting down, the mayor came by my office and said, looks like that Chattanooga is going to change, at least temporarily. We're going to have to shut stuff down. How do we leverage what the fiber system to be a bigger asset to our community? So that started a lot of conversation. It wasn't a few weeks later, Dr. Johnson came to my office and said, here's a big challenge with what we're running into in the schools, and it's not going away. It's not going to go away at the start of this next year. How do we put our heads together and solve this challenge? And then from that point on, it was a group that included, and you're also hearing from the foundation's very active in education in our community, saying, this is a challenge, how do we solve it? So a group of folks really engaged together to think through, how can we solve this need? And not how can we solve it for today, but how can we solve it not just for today, but for tomorrow and next year and the next year. So what we ended up putting in place is a sustainable program that, you know, in definition is 10 plus years. I have no doubt that that won't be 20, 30, 40 years, because I don't see any reason that it will ever stop. It's that powerful, have that big of an impact on our community, you know. And a couple of the things that are core to it is, it's not minimal speeds. It's a minimum of 100 megabits per second, symmetrical upload and download. It's not data caps. It's none of those typical constraints you see on internet connections. You know, it's taking care of not just the connection to the house, but the connection inside the house. And it was really, we had to think through some challenges, like state law said that we ourselves can't have to recover costs for, we can't sell below our cost. And so one of the things that came out of our discussion and thinking creatively about how we do it was creating this partnership of public and private entities to fund the incremental capital, so that the costs were basically covered, and then we could continue a long-term sustainable program. And certainly had a tremendous group in our community that both public and private, you know, groups seeing the need and rising up to meet that need.
Thank you, David. And Dr. Johnson, your students are going to have home access at no cost to them for, as David said, at least 10 years. We can imagine the importance of having that access during this pandemic, but can you talk about the importance of that access even when the schools are in session?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely going to be transformational. You know, when we begin to go back and think about what most school systems have done over the course of the last decade plus, it has been, you know, obviously a focus around the integration of technology, but oftentimes that focus lives and dies at the schoolhouse level, whether it's the purchase of the device or the purchase of the learning management system, or, you know, making the infrastructure internally in schools more robust to handle the bandwidth. I think oftentimes what's missed is that, you know, as the research shows, 83% of a child's K-12 life is spent outside of school. And so, you know, what are we doing to extend the learning, or to make sure that the learning can continue outside of the schoolhouse? And oftentimes it's so daunting to begin to think about, how do you deal with that, that most folks don't touch it. And we're very fortunate that we will have the ability to continue the learning, which opens up a whole new world of teaching and instruction and access, you know, for students. And I think, you know, one of the things that we often talk about as well is not just the benefit for the student, but the benefit for the entire family, because now you're opening up a whole new world for a family. And I'm not the best person to speak to this, but I anticipate it being a major economic driver going forward, and having some impact from that construct as well.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. And Laura, you're representing the philanthropic community here. I want to ask you to talk about two things. First, how did you go about raising the funds? And secondly, can you talk a little bit about numbers? How many children, how many families, and how far have we gotten?
Mm-hmm. Sure. You know, from a private philanthropic standpoint, this has been relatively easy to garner support for Ed Connect. I mean, I think for all of the reasons that you've heard before, it's clear that this is an essential and transformative project for our community. And there's a number of reasons why it's been really attractive for our private funders. You know, first is this sense of urgency. You know, digital equity has always been a challenge for Chattanooga. And our community has a number of partnerships and programs that have worked to address digital equity on a smaller scale. But when the pandemic hit, as the mayor said, it created a real sense of urgency and clarity around the immediate need for students. And second, we've had great leadership and collaboration thanks to all of the leaders that are on this panel. They all have a great deal of respect and credibility. So when they stood up and said student connectivity is a priority for our organizations and for the community, we paid attention to that. Each of these leaders, they've committed significant resources, and to their credit, they said, we're going to make this happen no matter what. And we knew that because we have an underlying infrastructure of partnerships and collaboration in the community, there's a lot of confidence that, that they could really pull off a project on the scale and that it could be done equitably. And then finally, the funding structure and the sustainability of it is really attractive. I mean, as David mentioned, this is the best quality internet. We're not saying that, low-income families are getting worse internet. It's the best quality internet, and it's for 10 years. And the proposition to foundations was it's an upfront investment cost of $8.2 million, but that really covers, and then it's sustained over 10 years between commitments from the district and from EPB. And so from a philanthropic standpoint, again, that's an ideal situation where it's like an one-time upfront investment is going to allow us to get this robust solution for 10 years at least. And what's more, 2/3 of that upfront funding was committed from public sources. So both from the city, from the county, from Hamilton County Schools, and even with the help of the Enterprise Center from CARES funding that y'all were able to apply for. So really, we were just looking for about 1/3 of that funding from private sources. And as far as the private sources go, we'll talk a lot today about the importance of collaboration and partnerships. That's also really helpful on the funder side. So the Benwood Foundation is part of a funding collaborative along with 4 other local foundations called the Smart City Venture Fund, which is focused on public education, funding public education and workforce initiatives. So really, Ed Connect was a no-brainer for the Venture Fund to support. In addition, Blue Cross Blue Shield Foundation of Tennessee is also connected with the Venture Fund, and they made a significant commitment on this as well. And then our local community foundation, which is also a partner in the Venture Fund, has been able to engage and leverage some of their individual donors. So at this point, of the $8.2 million, $5.5 million is raised and committed from private sources. About $2.4 million $5.5 million has been committed from public sources. $2.4 million has been committed from private sources. And so we're about $300,000 away from that 8.2 goal, and we expect to raise that from private sources as well.
Go ahead.
To talk, I know the mayor mentioned a little bit about the numbers. I think a part that is really attractive is the scale of this. So, the fact that this is a commitment to provide connectivity for up to 17,000 households. It's 28,500 students in the district, which is really all students and families that qualify for free and reduced lunch. And at this point, I think we're well on our way. I think over 5,000 households out of the 17,000 have been connected, with another 8,000 kind of beginning that process. So made huge progress.
Thank you. That is pretty amazing. Mayor Berke, I often hear people say this could only happen in Chattanooga, and we have a willing and enthusiastic partner in EPB, so that's certainly a major factor. But I'd like you to talk about the importance of partnership and having long-standing, strong relationships as a group of people who lead in this community.
Well, thanks, Deb. And I hear that comment a lot. This is something that's unique to Chattanooga, and it upsets me. Frankly, I get frustrated when it sounds like people are defeated and they see something that's happening on internet access here and say that it can't happen elsewhere. I'm an American. I'm a Tennessean. I care about the communities that surround Chattanooga. I care about the North Georgia communities that are right next to us. I care about all of our neighbors, and I want everybody to have access to this, not just in our community. And so one of the reasons that we've been so successful is because we've had a progressive utility headed by David Wade, who's one of the most thoughtful leaders in this space in our country. We have Lori Quillen, who's one of the most brilliant policy people that I've ever met. I would challenge any community to find a school system where achievement scores have been lifted more quickly than they have been since Bryan Johnson came to Chattanooga. And of course, we recruited you, Deb, to Chattanooga because of your amazing success in both education and digital equity. So we had this group here, and we meet regularly. I know that on the first Thursday of every month at 11 o'clock, I'm going to see Deb's smiling face. Used to be in my office, now on my computer screen. I meet regularly with David and others. So we have standing meetings and think about collaboration as a muscle. And just like any muscle, if you don't use it, it will atrophy. And the more that you use it, it will grow and get stronger. And, I think about, just as I look at this, the number of times that Dr. Johnson and I speak about something involving schools, the number of times that Benwood supports not just this, but lots of other projects in collaboration with the city. And just one concrete example, at State of the City a couple of years ago, I talked about resilience. The next morning, I think before 8 a.m., I had a call from David Wade wanting to come talk to me. And he had an idea about a resilience project that we could do together, which is now underway, that will make sure that we have a corridor along where our public safety assets are located that will have a microgrid, again, to make them less vulnerable to all kinds of intrusions and dangers. That's what collaboration looks like. But every city has it, not just Chattanooga, and every city can do it. And this idea that there's something special, the only thing that's special here is that we've built a culture of doing it and that we do it over and over again.
Thank you, Mayor. David, I'm going to turn back to you and ask, what challenges, technological, legal, staffing, and so forth, is EPB facing in trying to bring this project into fruition?
Yeah, well, I think the challenges are certainly when we started off there, how we approached the funding and the program itself had some challenges. We had to work under state laws that require us to not sell something below our cost, and that's when this group came up with the idea of how can we fund it through a partnership. So I think some of those early on challenges, may be seen almost as the easiest ones. It's the challenge of getting the momentum started and getting folks really engaged in doing something big. And now there certainly are ongoing challenges. One that we're running into, quite frankly now, is several of the MDUs that may have an exclusive agreement with another provider, saying, well, we're not sure we want to allow you in because of this agreement. And what we found, though, in that is if you get to the right person and you explain the impact on this community, they're pretty quick to reverse course and say, well, sure, how can we possibly put up any kind of a roadblock against something like this? But they're a little bit of challenge of just sharing that, what the impact is, and taking the impact away from it just being about dollars to being about, the community and lives of folks in the community. I would say another challenge that we've ran into is just how do you connect with everybody? You know, and you know, you have certainly students that you know, come from different households, all different levels of interest, living with you know, different grandparents or parents, and so getting connected, getting them to the table to interact so that we can make that connection has been one that's not moved quite as fast as I would love to see it move, but it continues to blossom and continues to move, and I'm sure it will. That will continue to happen. The staffing and supply chain certainly are challenges, but they're the kind of challenges you really deal with all the time, and it's just a matter of just stuff that you deal with and make sure that you have the right management team in place that's used to staffing up or staffing down and dealing with supply issues.
Thank you, David. Dr. Johnson, a question that as an educator, former educator, I've been wondering, and I imagine has no simple answer. How do you think the pandemic is going to impact student achievement, and how might home access impact those outcomes?
And Deb, I appreciate the question. I think it's one that is top of mind for most educators across the country, and has been well documented. You know, we all are used to dealing with the summer slide that traditionally is there during the summer months. You know, what we realized because of COVID is that so many students had to transition to an online environment as early as March, and have spent, in some systems, have spent since March in a virtual environment. And if the structures and support aren't in place at the house, in the home, then making sure that student gets plugging in and learning can be quite difficult. You know, the advantage of us having online access is, you know, one of the other barriers that exists for many of those students is not having access. And so we know that we're able to close that gap because of this great partnership and all of the collaboration that's happening across the community to make this happen. And so we're really excited about not just what's going to happen as a result of the pandemic, but I think as mentioned, this wasn't a stopgap. Let's, you know, stop this challenge in this period of time. This was, how do we transform what we do forever? And we're really excited about what's going to happen 2 years, 3 years, 10 years down the road as our teachers become more comfortable with leveraging that technology to extend the learning from within the class to the home.
Thanks. And as a follow-up, Dr. Johnson, can you talk a little about the virtual learning centers, please?
Absolutely. Well, you know, again, Deb, one of the challenges I was mentioning a little bit earlier is that, you know, so many students that are learning at home or online, they don't have the support at home. I think, as David mentioned, whether it's a grandparent or an aunt, an uncle, a cousin, families have to work and don't feel comfortable necessarily sending their children to school. And we felt that challenge as well as a system. With students logging on and continuing to matriculate through the coursework. And so, again, we're in a great community that collaborates. And I think this is a smaller scale testament to how nimble we can be as a community when that collaborative spirit exists. And faith-based organizations, city government, YFDs, other organizations have stepped up and are offering virtual learning centers where they'll take, 10, 12, 15, 20 students. And make sure that they have an adult that can help hold that student accountable for the continued learning. And this is a stopgap strategy, but one that we think is really critical to help until we get back to normalcy and to help make sure that the gap doesn't widen anymore than it has to.
Thank you very much. Lori, I'm going to ask you a question about how are we going to know the impact of this? How will we know that having invested the time, the money, the energy in this project will have the outcomes we're hoping to see?
Well, we see a huge opportunity to invest in research and evaluation around this project. I mean, clearly, as the first community to have such a robust and long-term digital equity solution at scale, we want to be really intentional about understanding the full impact of that. So, we will utilize part of the funds to help invest in research and evaluation. The immediate need is around evaluation that can just help us improve the implementation process. As David has mentioned, this is a huge project on a huge scale. And it's really been a collaborative process that's built from the ground up. And so the more we can build in some good feedback and recommendations to continually improve that process to make sure we're reaching vulnerable and disconnected families with this opportunity is really important. And then the other piece is just, really fully understanding the broad impact. As Mayor Berke mentioned, we don't want to be the only community that's doing this. And so we certainly want to fully understand the impact for ourselves, but be able to share that broadly. We think there's going to be a clear impact on student engagement and achievement, and the district is in a great position to be able to help track that impact as well. But we know there will be a broader impact, as Dr. Johnson mentioned. I think there's going to be an economic impact, and we're also asking questions about how can we track the impact for families in terms of their ability to work from home, in terms of their ability to access additional health, career, and financial sources. And certainly, Deb, with your help, we've gotten some great connections with national experts that can really help inform this research and make sure that it's informative and actionable, both for us as a community. I hope it lays the groundwork for our further investment in internet access, but then also for communities across the country.
Thank you, Lori. And now I'm going to ask a final question, but I'm going to go the other way around. I'm going to start with Lori, and I'm going to give the mayor the last word. So if you are a city or a town or a county that's trying to solve this home access gap for children, what one recommendation or what one strategy might you recommend that would help them move a project forward? And so, Lori, I'll ask you first.
Well, I appreciate going first. I'm going to go for the obvious answer, which is the collaboration and the partnerships have clearly been critical to making this happen. I've been completely inspired by the leaders on this panel in terms of their commitment to just saying, this is important, this is the right thing for our community, and we're going to make it happen. And honestly, I wonder if they had known now all of the barriers, all of the things that would arise, would that have gotten in their way of making that commitment? It probably wouldn't have, but all of that is to say, there's so many places where we could have gotten sidelined by just the number of questions around strategies and how we were going to make it happen. But these leaders didn't let that happen. And then what we're really seeing is that with the partners at the table between the Enterprise Center, EPB, Hamilton County Schools, the city, really coming to the table as problem solvers to actively address those issues as they arrive, and to have flexibility in how they're doing it. That has been really critical into really making the rapid progress that we've made so far.
Thank you, Lori. And the same question to you, Dr. Johnson. What recommendations would you have?
Absolutely. Well, I think my recommendation is don't be crippled by how daunting the task can appear. I think, as the mayor spoke to earlier, you can absolutely do this. And so get started. In our system, a lot we talk about, having the picture, the purpose, the plan, and the part. And so what's your picture, what's your purpose, what's your compelling why, and then develop your plan, and then what's your part in making this come to life, and get started with it. And I think if we had thought about this, and all the different intricacies and parts, it could have been overwhelming and daunting, but everybody kept plugging at their part of the work. And it's been over several years that everybody's kept plugging at their part of the work. If we had stopped and didn't, our board didn't decide to purchase devices and learning management systems, et cetera, then when they were positioned to flip the switch, we would not have been ready. And so that's true for every organization represented here and those beyond. And that's why we're positioned where we are as a community. And so get started.
Thanks, Dr. Johnson. And David.
Well, certainly I would have nothing to do but to echo what both Lori and Dr. Johnson have said. But I think in addition, though, I would add is the notion of thinking big, because it's often easy to think incremental. And I think what made this project so successful is the idea of thinking big. I know early on in the discussions, a conversation came out about 5,000 students. That was a discussion for a minute or two, was about 5,000 students. And before long, it was, oh, well, why are we saying 5,000 when there's 28,000 students that are impacted? And how would we even choose those 5,000? Then the question, the tendency started, well, how could we get this done by this date? But then the bigger question came about is not how quick could we get it done, but how long could we make the impact and how big could we make the impact? So I would suggest don't short yourself in a shallow vision, that thinking big is the right way to approach these problems.
Thank you, David. And Mayor?
Well, I certainly don't have any greater wisdom than Lori and Bryan and David, so I'll try to approach it a different way with the same answer. So a few years ago, I was at a conference and there was a really small one with just a few people there, and one of the speakers was Martin O'Malley, who was then the governor of Maryland, and he said, great leaders make themselves vulnerable, because only in the act of knowing that you could fail will people truly get in the boat and work as hard as they can. And that made a huge impact on me, because I think there's a lot of truth in that. We've been working at Digital Equity for a long time, and I won't say that we've done things on this scale that failed, but we didn't make as much progress as we could because I think we just weren't setting our sights high enough. So we had earlier had a initiative called NetBridge, which also targeted families with children on free or reduced lunch, and it was at a reduced cost. Certainly there were a couple thousand families that did that, but it didn't have the impact either as a resonant piece of our community or on the families themselves, because I think we just weren't quite there yet. And so, and I'm also struck by the idea of leapfrogging, because I remember giving a speech about our fantastic internet system in a great American city. And I think it was maybe before my speech, they had tables organized where they were talking about how to solve the internet issues in their community. And there was a table that was devoted to public housing, talking about getting 3 megabit connections to the public housing units. And just to give you an idea, our system goes up to 10 gig, which is 10,000 meg. And they were talking about 3 meg. And I said to the table, if it's this hard to get 3 meg, why not try to leapfrog and go for the whole thing? This is about setting a vision. So my advice, as Lori and Bryan and David have said, is set your vision, understand what's at stake, the implications of what you're doing, pull together the top talent that you have, people like Lori and Bryan and David and Deb, get them at the table, people with ideas and with talent and with institutions that they can push to their will. make sure that you put together a plan that is achievable, and then go to it. Because, frankly, from my standpoint, I've been mayor for almost 8 years. And when I think about what HCS Ed Connect is doing in our community, 28,000 kids with 100 gig plus internet at zero cost, plus the mothers and grandparents and uncles and whoever else are in the homes who are living with them and their access to it. There are not going to be many things that in a year or two, when I'm sitting around with nothing to do and on the couch eating some chips, that I'm going to be prouder of, right? This is the thing that all of us on this call are going to feel really good about for a long time, and that's why I'm in this business.
Thank you, Mayor. You can tell why it's such an honor to be a part of this group and a privilege to be a part of this program. I thank you all for all the hard work you do, and I appreciate you every day. Thanks for hopping on this call with us today. Bye-bye.